name is
Sorry,
Gerry.
we're good.
Okay. Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka. It's July 28, 2021. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Rob Grant on his show. I'm probably wrong about everything. Our special guest today is Robbie Dew. He's been teaching media and political independent thinking for many years. It's an honor and a pleasure. You gentlemen, I'm here. I'm a student. I just wanted to do a quick intro. This is Laughtears #2, and we're renaming I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. We hijack Rob's show all the time to call it I'm Probably Ever About Media, meaning we're ever ready in extending our humanness. And is that right or wrong? Our inventions are extending our humanness. To bring it right to the immediate, we had Simone, the greatest gymnast of all time, say yesterday in the news, we're human too. She failed. She made a mistake. And that is a human thing. I think what we could tackle today and discuss and probe and grounds for future research is the fact that humans invent things and then these things don't work. So what do we do about it? So let's start off with a real simple round robin question. Robbie Dew, we'll start with you. What was your motive and consequences in teaching online? When did you start? Why did you do it? Give us one major motive and one major consequence, because we're in the midst of a live TV show. So go for it. You've been doing this for years, Robbie Dew.
Well, my motivation was simple. It was easy, and it was just I could work from home. It also allowed me to have multiple jobs, and so teaching as an adjunct, you can't expect to receive enough employment from a single university. So you have to teach at multiple universities. And so I could have a couple of live classes and have a couple of online classes. It also allowed me to move with a job, which it has now. And it just makes your life a whole lot easier. A consequence of which there are many unintentional consequences. It's freed up my life and my time. I work from the road. I'll be traveling in about, on Saturday I'm flying out. So that's been wonderful. An unintended consequence is I'm hyper attentive to checking emails. I've become a digital person. I very much identify with millennials or maybe even the younger generation in terms of like being addicted to my phone, being addicted to social media. And that's a direct outgrowth of being so computer connected for my work.
That was good. Good summary. So Rob Grant, you've been doing your podcast for how long? What was a major motive and what's one major consequence?
Well, the motive for this is that I was seeing that there were better ways to communicate, in a sense that it seemed that, well, we were talking about this just beforehand, that there's this side and there's that side. There's the left, there's the right, there's the liberals, there's the conservatives, there's the yin, there's the yang, right? And there was always confirmation bias. People would talk in their circles, talks amongst themselves, and they would just all agree upon everything. And it came to a point where it was like, well, have you ever spoken to the other side about these issues? Oh, no, they wouldn't understand. And I said, well, how will you know until you find out? So the purpose of the show, by saying I'm probably wrong about everything, it's disarming, and it's kind of like a peace offering and hoping to hear from other sides and other perspectives in the pursuit of truth, or the exploration of it. And a consequence of it is I started before COVID, and at that time I was doing interviews in person, and now I do them over the internet. So now I'm able to reach so many more people. But the unintended sort of consequences of that is the back and forth dialogue. It seems like it's easier when you're in person than when you're online. Like sometimes it's like, like we're all at a stop sign and we're like, who goes first? But yeah, I guess that's one thing.
Well, that was good, because I've been doing events in person for 35, 40 years. And I find that these live TV podcasts, Zooms, whatever you want to call them, are way better than people interrupting, because in my sort of situation, I set up the protocol as, hey, raise your hand. But Robbie Dew, you put out a booklet, a study guide called Media and Society. We have a link to it on our page right here, and it is an amazing book. You've really delved deep into how inventions, how media, you know, coming from McLuhan world, you know, when we say media, we mean inventions, technology. So media could be philosophy, a cell phone, a pencil, a bulldozer, a religion, whatever. You know, it can be tangible or not. Tell me, with you being so in touch with students presently in the here and now, what's the most, or what's one pressing issue? What's one important invention that's you're seeing as having a big impact that needs to be studied?
There hasn't been. I mean, obviously, cell phone addiction. That's sort of a softball. I mean, that's an obvious one.
Well, it doesn't. It can be obvious or not. I'm just saying one that's on your cutting edge. You know, like I could suggest AI voicing. You know, with the new documentary, they faked the guy's voice with AI, and it sounds just like him, and no one knew it. But anything, you know.
I'm going to answer your question slightly differently.
Yeah.
I think with this younger generation, example, in my booklet, I keep it to magazine length articles. They're half a page long. Sometimes I highlight the key concepts. You know what I'm saying? I separate the paragraphs. I make it like it's just little bite-sized chunks. When they see a page full of text, oh, you got to read all that. I don't think it works for them. And I know there was a news service which I was subscribed to recently. I think it was called Axios. And rather than writing their news articles in prose, they essentially said, they had a heading here, you know, results. And it was written in prose, but what I'm saying, it was very outline driven. Here's what you need to know. Parties infected. Counterpoint. And it was sort of like you didn't have to search the text for what you want. And I think that, which also, by the way, is very much like any kind of computer menu. Ideally, your computer gives you an option of choices rather than you typing in commands. That's how computers started. Was, you know, you had to remember the commands. You know, writing in BASIC and writing these awful programs. And now you just go, I want that. Then it gives which of these choices I want that. You know, it's very much mouse and selection driven. So obviously, texting is this way. It's truncated. It's short. And you know, sometimes if I'm going to write two thoughts, I put them in two separate texts. Therefore, they are succinct. I like it when they send me their address, they put only the address in the text. That way, I can click on it and go right to it in my maps. So this sort of chunking, sometimes it's called, I believe, chunking or outline form, you know, is a reflection of the way people's minds are and the way that they're learning now, which is, what do I need to know? Cut to the fucking chase. Can I curse on here? I'm sorry.
Yes.
That's fine.
Okay.
Be yourself, please.
So anyway, you guys comment on that, but that's what I'm seeing, you know. And I don't know that it was. I mean, in my day, it was like, oh, read chapter 2 and 3, and I'm just like, and I'd look in there and I'd try to figure it out from the headings. And do I have to read all 20 pages? There's a party to go to, and
I was going to say that when I took history in university, I would learn about India, and it would be like. So I would learn about Indian history in 2 weeks. That doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry, it does not. But kind of to your point of this, you know, succincticism or whatever you want to call it, just made up a word. But what are the pros and the cons of that, or what are the services? Thank you. Services and disservices. Thank you. And because sometimes when you read a book, it's like you read a really long book and you're like, whoa, that was a really cool part. And then you read like, these are the key points of this book. do you get the same enjoyment? Like, how does that affect us? I guess in terms of let's get to the point versus let's read this and see what else we get along the journey, right? It's old saying,
it's a dance of language, and
right.
and you're in a great book full of many ideas. There might be a passage which isn't even the most important part, but the way the author covers some emotional dilemma in the character's life is just brilliantly written, and you remember it forever. It's a learning tool for you. But yeah, that would be a disservice. That's lost. The ability of language to construct not only a literal image in our mind, but an emotional one as well. And what we're really talking about here is painting versus photography. Maybe, I mean, we are in a photography world. Those images are cheap and they're passed around, and they're relatively easy to generate. I mean, creating a really fantastic piece of digital art is not easy. You have to know what you're doing, and we've all seen it before. But having said that, it's way easier than creating a Renaissance masterpiece. And so it really begs the question, after all these technological advances we still feel like we have less time. Time and the pressure of time is a big part of a foundation of all this. Secondarily, I would say for younger generations, it's also, I think that they are much more skeptical of their elders than maybe previous generations have been, and should be, because of their access to the internet. They've seen how we screw things up, and then they've been told by the reasonable adults amongst them that, yeah, we kind of F things up and the planet's not in the best shape, and you better enjoy this, you better enjoy that coral reef before it disappears. And I think there's just a little bit of like, enough. I got to read McLuhan. I have to have seen the Godfather series. To be able to converse as an intelligent being in this world, and I think they're a little over it, and I think that plays into this truncated. What do I need? Frank Sinatra, Elvis, Frank Sinatra. Who's next? Give it to me.
Well put, Robbie Dew. That was great, and both Rob, you too, because when I talk to students, I will say, I'll teach you my cultural icons if you teach me yours. Like talking to my nephew last night, 25, I wanted to know, who'd you grow up listening to music-wise? I didn't even know. And he goes, my brother, his dad had a Bob Marley CD in the boat that they spent all their time in, water skiing all summer. He says, that's the biggest influence on my musical taste. 20 years of listening to the same Bob Marley CD. I goes, that's good. Then, then he called disco Prince and Michael Jackson. I goes, well, that's not disco, that's dance music, but fine line. And then he said Katy Perry, which he says, I like pop music. I goes, that's fine. At least he gave me his cultural icons in the music genre world. So that was healthy. And, I was like, I would love you to, know about jazz and know about other things too. But it's how we approach that, enlightenment thing. I think Rob Grant, you did a great thing. He says, I just made up a word, and that's Finneganese. That's what James Joyce did with Finnegan's Wake. He made up words. And Robbie Dew, you just nailed it. He says, that's the dance of language. So we're trying to reinvent language, or as Joyce did, was language about language. So how do we make machines, technologies about technology, so that we can figure out what technology is doing to us? Because it's evident that it doesn't work all the time. So, the next question is how do we deal with something when it doesn't work? I made up an aphorism as a kid. I said, if it works, break it, the American way. And it is like everything in America, we like it, but we want it to break so we can replace it with the new point 20
yeah.
And then McLuhan came up with, if it works, it's obsolete. So, we'll start with you, Robbie Dew. What is it about inventions that we know they're not going to work, but we want to put our heart and soul in them? In fact, we want to extend our humanness, even though they're not going to work. And in working or failing, go ahead, sir.
Well, they're all doomed to fail because a better machine is invented. And remember, when a machine or a media is invented, it changes the environment. So now the typewriter is invented, and now you have the clickety clack of what they used to call that, the steno room, or steno. There was a room in some corporations where there was just often women just typing away, in a row, and that changed the environment. It changed it auditorily. You had you couldn't have, other things couldn't be going on with all that racket. That was just the room where that took place. But then beyond that, as people got, when the first time you do a typewriter and you're like, oh my gosh, it's really the ultimate conclusion of the printing press, isn't it? It's a relatively mobile printing press, right? And that's kind of its last phase when it becomes a personal item. But there's problems with it, correcting mistakes and doing all these different things. And then, something else comes along, a word processor comes along. And now you can backspace and you can correct. That's just much better. And it's amazing how we get attached to these old machines. The point I was also going to make related to this, and it's in the booklet, the typewriter that we use today is called a QWERTY. And that's because it's the top letters of your keyboard. If you look across, they're called a QWERTY. And it's a greatly outdated device. It was designed to hamper the speed of the top typist because the hammers on the letters would get stuck. So that's why the A is out here on your pinky, on your least dexterous finger. If you look at the keyboard, it's dispersed. There's play Scrabble with it. You could put all the 1 points here on these two fingers and put the higher scores like X and Q out on the pinkies. That would make more sense. And there is a board that does that. It's called a QWERTY board. And people who are trained on a QWERTY board type 20-30% faster because you're taking advantage of the natural dexterity. But everyone's learned on a QWERTY board, not a Dvorak. Excuse me, I think I misspoke there. Dvorak is the new version keyboard, and QWERTY is the old. But we're all stuck with a QWERTY keyboard. We're all stuck with a keyboard that purposely designed by the machine age to slow down the human that couldn't keep up with the machine. We now still use that keyboard with a machine that is much faster than us.
Really well put. And so that's like a breakdown that we've turned into a breakthrough in that we've all adapted. Like my dad could type like 120 words a minute or some outrageous amount because he learned on the QWERTY. And you switch him over to the new, he wouldn't know how to do it.
He would still be typing like a QWERTY, right? Because
absolutely.
No, because of his mind, it's conditioned.
Yeah. How do you spell that, Rob? QWERTY.
It's the first few keys. So QWERTY.
Oh, QWERTY. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's the first 6 letters of your keyboard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just to add, Rob Grant, before we go to you, is the interesting thing McLuhan said is when the computer, let's say when the QWERTY is the dominant, and then if the Dvorak becomes dominant, then the QWERTY becomes an art form that we never get rid of. And, look at Tom Hanks. He collects old typewriters. They become like an art form. It's just like the horse and buggy becoming the car. And then what do we call the car power? Horsepower.
Right.
So it's that it will never go away completely.
It'll never go away. It's this echo. And obsolete technologies become romanticized. And that's a great analogy.
Yes.
Obsolete technologies become romanticized. Yeah.
Who has old cars? Rich people. Who has cars that it's like, why would you own that? That's a piece of shit. That's garbage technology. Yeah. A rich person does.
Yeah. Rich old white guys love their cars as a symbol, and of course, they're very often challenging to maintain, and you really can't run them like an everyday vehicle. They're
not efficient.
It would be a waste. So you take them out for Saturday strolls and car shows.
but they're aesthetically more beautiful. But Rob Grant, that's the thing is you're making a value judgment like a great old, 63 Mustang is obsolete. You're saying, but to someone who owns it and maintains it, it's an artwork and it's still an efficient transportation. So I'm asking, how do we navigate machines, technologies, media's not working? Do they fail or do they not work? That was the question. Like we were trying to suss that out, because why would
they
we
linger? They linger.
Yeah.
Blade Runner has this because you have the new technology just basically stuck over top of the old technology.
Yeah.
Okay. Prior to going to what is it, 2K or what we HD, which we now are
4K, right?
Yeah.
4K, and that took a long time. Was that officially 96? I think that was 96 when that switchover happened. One of our interns can check that. But prior to that, when they originally had black and white television, they had what amounted to 6 lines of data, then grouped and then stacked on top of each other. When they added the color, they just stuck it in with the black and white, which resulted in color being less crisp than black and white, but it had the color because they kept basically the format, and they only had so much room to shove in there, so they sort of crammed in. Well, it looked like crap. It got better over the years. The 4K technology and the HD technology took care of all that, but we were stuck with this because because many people had black and white televisions. The signal had to go out in a way that a black and white television could accept it, as well as a color television.
Yeah.
So it's like technologies lag behind. The MP3 is horrible, but we're stuck with it because it became so popular and so many people use it.
Yeah.
Well, and maybe to that point, it seems like when the new innovation comes out, like so from black and white, this jump to color, it's like this new thing is really not that good. It's kind of like when the first electric car came out, it was like it was a gut.
Wait, you're talking about the one that GM put out?
I'm not too sure what.
Was it called the EV? Yeah, that's it. You should see Who Killed the Electric Car.
Yes. Yeah.
See that film.
Yeah. I mean, of course there's these elements behind it, but it's this idea of the first new innovation or the advancement of it. Okay. I'll use a personal example. There's this game called Call of Duty that all the young people love. Sure. Every new year there's a new game and they're like, this isn't that good. Last year's was way better. And then the next one comes out and they're like, oh, last year's was really good. It's like, wait a second. It's change. But yet it's like, it's kind of just, it's, you get used to what you're used to. I think Yogi Berra said that, right?
Right.
And when new things come out, it's like, it's not that good. But then before we know it, we've adjusted to it. And now it's in this realm.
And going back to that earlier question we asked about how it feels like life is speeding up, which of course it is because of the speed of communications.
Right.
You get used to what you get used to because there's a comfort and it's there every day. Well, we have a higher turnover culture for technology. Remember when Napster was cutting edge? Hey, do you have Napster? Do you have Spotify? And now there's
I buy CDs, bro.
Yeah, exactly. And now, I mean, CDs held on for a while, but now it's just incredibly obsolete. No, I mean, only, I will occasionally buy one, but it's like a novelty. Like, let's go into the CD store and buy a CD.
Right. Now people are buying vinyl, right?
Yeah.
But that's because, one thing is the sound quality is superior. And two, I think.
So I could never tell the difference, but I say that there's a difference.
Oh, there's a
difference. It's so much better. Yeah.
If you have a DC, you have to have a good needle. It starts there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You have to have a good needle and stereo, But anyway, but there's also just that artwork.
Yes.
And that's the example. There's nothing. The CDs aren't too romantic. They're more romantic than MP3s. You can tap out a line of cocaine on them, I understand. But you can't break up weed like you used to on the albums. But
let's get practical here there. But, this is funny. Rob Grant, you really anticipated one of the headlines I was going to bring up. This is the LA Times this Sunday saying e-cars might save the planet but scorch the earth. So, if you go back to the car, why Henry Ford invented the car, and
Right.
then it is a successful invention in the long run, but in another way, it's destroyed the world and killed people. And, it's got a lot of disservices and it has a lot of services. But my question was back there a little while ago, and Rob Grant, I wanted you to address it too, was what is it about the human in inventing something and knowing in the long run that it's not going to work, but they know that they want to do the human thing, is make the world a better place. This will make, as Rob Dew said earlier, it's easier. How can we make the world better, easier, more efficient when we know inventions usually do fail and don't work? So is it just this vicious circle? We just keep trying, or how do you navigate that contradiction in our faith in inventions, our faith in the media to deliver? And when you go to McLuhan, he says if it works, it's obsolete. To me, he's saying the human condition is that nothing works, and that's the human condition.
Can I jump on that one?
Yeah. Go ahead, Rob.
You could take this to its ultimate conclusion. I've known people who you get very nihilistic. You could look at everything, Greenpeace, and every Mother Teresa was supposedly abusive to her staff, and everybody's got an angle and so forth. And you can become quite, nihilistic about things. But it is true. There is this idea called permaculture, and there's this idea of designing things in a natural way so that they have. It's a resource-based economy, and it's designing things so that you don't have zero waste. So you design it from start to finish. Now, that still isn't going to stop the unintended consequences of a device. It's not. But if you designed a device, a theoretical thing, we'll just say, that its output then had a use, like a cow. It eats grass and it puts out poo, and that poo is great fertilizer and so on and so forth. In a cyclical nature, in combinate biomimicry is another.
Right.
Biomimicry is another around design machines even that way to do that. So I mean, maybe the helicopter is a early example of biomimicry. They've gotten further. So, but through all that's a step in the right direction. Permaculture, designing the environment of your home to work together, and humans can do that. We do it in gardens. We have success in gardens. A Japanese garden, which is manicured, but it looks a little wild in places. There's a little symmetry on purpose, but inevitably, especially objects that enter the world, they're going to have a cycle where they are obsolesced. And then what do you do with them? Then you just got junk.
Yeah.
And that's a big problem for us.
Yeah, that's an amazing thing that you talked about. Biomimicry is sort of Marshall saying everything we invent extends some humanness. But we can also look at the plants and the animals and mimic their nature and extend. So, he said that the most human thing is our inventions.
Yes.
But,
but then we're stuck with them. Then they're hanging out in the cave, and the cave's getting crowded,
But I want Rob Grant to address that too. It's like, we know the inventions aren't going to work, but we still persist. I'm asking you, Rob Grant, how do you navigate that contradiction? Do you just go full steam ahead and go, it doesn't matter? Or how do you navigate that personally? Like in regards to your show, you go, well, I know this might fail or it might not work, but I'm going to go do it. What's the human drive there?
Perhaps invention is much like learning to walk. I mean, if you watch a child learn how to walk, they keep trying and they fall down, but they don't give up. And perhaps our innate desire to create the perfect invention is much like that, is that we keep trying and trying until we find something that eases the discomforts of existence. Maybe that's the goal, is just How can we make our lives as easily as possible? But then we find that thing out, and then we're like, you know what? I want to get a 1933 Chevy. I want the slowest possible vehicle ever. I want to slow everything down because my Honda Civic, it's way too reliable, right? Something like that. I mean, we're in the pursuit of perfection. And then once we get close to it, we ask ourselves like, oh man, I want to get back to the good old days. I want to play Call of Duty from last year.
Yeah.
Right? This idea of the romantic, it's like when you think about your childhood, it's like, you know what, man, my childhood was great. And then you really think about it, you're like, hold on, I was a nerd and everybody picked on me and I never had a date. And I went home and I listened to really yeah. And I went home and I listened to really depressing music. It's like, maybe the past wasn't that great. Maybe this is the best time. You know what I mean? Like there's actually a term for when you think about the past as being a great, it's not romanticizing either. It's like a really awesome word that I forgot. If I remember, I'll send it to you. But there is this idea of like, why can't we do it the way that we used to? Well, really think about how we used to do it. It wasn't that. There's a reason why we're here.
Yeah.
Right.
Two examples jump to mind, Jerry. Think about our own government. As set up in the Constitution, senators serve for 6 years, representatives serve for 2. Now, the reason was they were supposed to be representative of the people, and things can change in 2 years. You aren't representing properly, we'll throw you out. That seems like a good idea on the face of it. But in practice, modern, the moment a representative is elected, they got to start dialing for dollars for the next election. And it makes them, because of that and the extreme cost of media, it makes them beholden to rich donors. Okay, so there's a flaw in the system that was a really well intended, just as you suggest. Let's invent something that is not a monarchy and it serves the people. And of course, there were competing interests within the founding fathers. Some were more imperialist and more we can't trust the people. That's why they built in there was a fear of mob rule. They built in certain checks and balances. And I think, in answer to your question, the only thing I can say is that built into the thing you invent should be the ability to modify it, and should be the understanding that it needs to be modified over time. Especially, now that wasn't so true 100 years ago. A device, a Model T or something maybe built in that time, first of all, it was built to last. It was much easier to work on. Of course, everyone complains now they can't work on their cars. Those days are over. But we have to think about, especially in soft institutions, we have to constantly be monitoring it and making adjustments to it. And that theoretically exists. You have referendums here in California, but even that process can be mutated. I mean, the whole thing with the recalling the governor, that was an additional check and balance that California put into its rules. Not a bad thing. Hey, we're really sick of you guys. We don't want to wait 3 more years. We want to get rid of this guy. Well, the Republicans have used it they've recalled Newsom, the current governor of California, Rob. They've recalled him like 27 times. Like they recalled him like 5 days into his administration because the mechanism exists. They're using, not as it was intended, but they're using it to essentially create a problem, create paperwork, and spend taxpayer dollars. And finally, now they have a referendum on him, and there's a recall election in the middle of September. They finally got one to go through. So there was a fix, a hack in the system to adjust something and give a little bit more liberty to the people that is now being used against the good of the larger good.
I mean, laws are funny, right? Because laws are written for reasons, right? Like, for example, there's a law that you can't throw a horse out of an airplane, which therefore must mean that somebody at some point in time threw a horse out of an airplane, right? So it's like we're talking about kind of kill switches here, or this ability to sort of like stop and like, we got to figure this out, right? But the only way to find out how something doesn't work is you get to a point where you're like, that doesn't work, right? You have to experience something to know when it doesn't work. we can't know we can't know that when we're driving our Model T in 1922, that after a certain range, it's going to break down and it's going to need an oil change, right? But then as we adapt, and I think that, I don't know about you guys, but in this current period of time, I think we're forgetting how adaptable or virulent or whatever the word is we are as a human species.
Right.
We are incredibly resilient, but we've forgotten that. I really think we have, or at least that's the message from media that I'm getting, is that
we've become soft.
Yes.
The other analogy I was going to talk about with terms of comfort is camping. When you go camping, you want to go out in the nature, and
control.
It is. It's like, in a weird way, it's an experience of control, because I like to go out in nature, and I will have simple, basic camps, but sometimes we'll glamp. And, we've got this stove out and that, and, we're going to have sushi because I froze it last night. It's been thawing all day. And
That's smart.
You create comfort where you are, and you slowly also destroy or at least transform. I'll say transform the environment around. Every path you've ever walked on, that you've hiked on, has been walked on thousands of people for thousands of years prior to you, and animals for that matter. And that you're just now, the nice trails that are nice and flat and wide and easy to walk on, well, they're that way for a reason. Somebody had to lay that down. And so I think in that area is forever transformed. So it seems to be inevitability that anything that we create, we're stuck with it, the good and the bad. You guys have seen it's a crazy world. The gods must be crazy. The gods.
Yeah, I was just thinking of that movie earlier. Glad you brought that up.
It's a perfect example. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, we're interconnected here, but yeah. Anyways, go ahead with what you're going to say.
Well, just you guys know the story. I guess if the viewers don't know the story, the Coke bottle shows up in this primitive tribe's possession and disrupts the social order because there's only one of them and it has so many damn uses. Right?
It's really a good movie, Rob. Both you guys said a lot there, and just to carry this on farther, is Neil Bohr's, a physicist, said the opposite of a correct statement is a false statement, but the opposite of a profound truth may well be another profound truth. So, you said it almost perfectly, Robbie Dew. McLuhan said the solution is in the problem. Like,
yes.
You can pull the solution. And Duchamp even took it a step farther. He says there's no solution because there's no problem. So it's when we, I'm trying to lay on you guys, well, why do we invent things if all we already know there's going to be problems to them and they're not going to work? And you both handled that really well. But I think the next thing is I would love to delve into is that Ezra Pound taught McLuhan that artists are the antenna of the race. They're detecting and broadcasting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions so that we can cope with them. So we don't like what cars do. I was raised in the Motor City. I have to wait at the corner of Venice and Lincoln half my life waiting for cars to go by so I could ride my bike and breathe pollution. And, I've had enough of cars. I've had 60 years of cars. I don't need cars anymore in my life. But, that's not being realistic. They're in my life. They will never go away. Cars will never go away.
Right.
So, I can learn how to cope with what I don't like about cars. But we can turn to the artist, like you brought up, film, books, whatever, paintings. And McLuhan said the job of art is to tell us what the world is made of. So we're talking a lot about matching and making. That's the difference. Matching is, well, we already have a car. Let's invent an electric car now. So we're going to remake what's already happened, and we're going to try to make it better. Like, I don't need this pen anymore. I can use a keyboard. or I can just talk into my cell phone and that will put it into text. So there's only 3 types of communication, basically: spoken word, printed word, and electronic word. That we haven't really invented a new there's many variations on them, all of them gesture. But this thing about matching and making, I think, is important, because how much are we just going to create something completely new? As soon as YouTube came out, I told all my friends about it, and it was just another form of TV. And that's what we're doing right now. We're doing live TV. Rob's got a TV station
and
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 yeah.
and to some extent, you can invent something that the race isn't ready for. I mean, you can invent it, but it's not going to take off.
Right.
Google Glasses, although they do have specific uses, I think medical uses and others in certain fields, they didn't take off for popular use. And maybe we'll get there. Maybe the next generation will be more open to it because they're used to having earbuds and sunglasses all the time and all these sorts of things. It does seem that we're doomed to invent, and we're doomed to suffer our inventions.
Yeah.
And
that's putting a value judgment on inventions. I don't want to say doomed. I would say we're doomed. They're doomed. They doom us, and they also enable us.
Yeah.
And they have services and disservices.
Yeah.
But here was the question I got the other day. So I said to this amazing thinker, John Rigler, who's combined hackers and painters. Check that book out. He's combined cryptology, current cryptocurrency, and Finnegan's Wake. And this guy is deep. Check out his interview I did with him. And I said, well, why do, McLuhan's big thing was, well, why do humans ignore the hidden psychic effects being broadcast to them through the artists? And why do we still ignore the hidden psychic effects so we can learn to cope with them? We still ignore them. He says, have humans always ignored the hidden psychic effects? So Robbie Dew, we'll start with you. Wasn't that he reinvented my question. So, usually people go, why do they ignore them? That's easy. They go, fear, scared, it's fine to answer the question, and you can go wherever you want, put it in any context. But he took it, because we're always going back like to the cave people. Well, what did they do? Or is it really that different? I mean, and he says, well, do you think that humans always have ignored the hidden psychic effects? Because they could go to the cave painter and go, dude, you're revealing the hidden psychic effects of hunting deer. I'm going to ignore that. Do you think humans have always had some tendency to ignore this deeper knowledge of our inventions, of our media?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, you don't think about it. Something shows up and it's the newest thing, and here it is, and you have to master it. And you're looking at its effects. You're just trying to deal with what it's supposed to do. You're just trying to master its intended effects, which are enormous and far-reaching. And the bigger the thing, the more rules there are for it, and it's greater its social impact. And then later on, it's just, the cell phone is the perfect example, or social media. Like, everyone loved it at first. I remember I get friended all the time. I just, I talk to somebody in a bar, the next day, I got a friend request. It was just, let's all be friends. And it's very naive and sweet in a certain way. And then over time, the unintended negative side effects of social media, people bickering, some people are like, enough, I've had enough. They bail out. I mean, now today, I think the majority of my friends, of my true friends, may be off social media. At least half are off,
And that's an important thing. That's knowing that fasting is an important thing to purify. It doesn't mean you're going to be off social media for the rest of your life. You're going to learn how to be a media ecologist. And you brought up the word environment. That was so important, Robbie Dew, earlier, is that the main thing is we're not talking about inventions of a car or a cell phone. We're talking about the environment it creates.
Right.
That's way bigger.
Well, think about you brought up fasting.
Yeah.
You know, fasting was a part, and it's very good for people to fast. It's like anything that's good for you, it's probably good for you to go without it for a little bit. Yeah. Certainly that's true of almost anything you enjoy.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And you'll appreciate it more when you come back to it. So we used to sort of not even ritualistically, by necessity, fast at the end of winter when the food stores were running out, right? Different cultures, obviously warm cultures, that's not so true. But in northern cultures, that was true. And then it got inculcated into our religions, into our three major Abrahamic religions, with Lent and Ramadan and Passover, where you give what and maybe there was some sort of therapy. I know there was some sort of therapeutic benefit to not eating and giving your stomach a cleanse periodically. Well, now, a few people do the Lent thing. Not a lot of people do the Lent thing. I can't speak for Islamic. I can't speak for Muslims and how strict they are, but amongst Christians, that's really a faded memory. It's an old, antiquated thing, right?
I call it piss over.
Oh yeah. So, but maybe there was something in there that was good for us, because now we have but you can have strawberries every day of the year.
Yeah. My friend,
that's great.
My friend's computer broke the other day. He's not a tech guy. He just got a cell phone for the first time half a year ago, and got a laptop just half a year ago. And he's just a Luddite, and he's happy artist, painting in his room and surfing. And he got into having a laptop and watching films, and he could watch surfers on YouTube, and go, wow. And his laptop broke. He took it in. He said, those 4 days they had it were the best 4 days of my life. He goes, and of course he's back in it, but he just raved how important a forced fast was on him. One other unique thing about fasting that I studied, if you look up fasting in Wikipedia, they call it a pseudoscience. And like pseudoscience, it seems that fasting works.
Yeah.
There's no proof that fasting works in scientific forms.
I think the term is interesting. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jerry.
Sorry. No, go ahead. Yeah.
I was gonna say the term fasting. I find that like, shouldn't it be almost like slowing? Because really,
I mean, it's just how words. That's etymology, how words to do without, is such an important thing. I mean, I'll give you one more example that was ideal. I always repeat. I'm talking to 40 art students in Philadelphia at the big art institute there. This was 10, 15 years ago. I says, everybody in here has a cell phone, right? And they'll go, yup. And one girl raised her hand. She goes, I don't. And everybody laughed. I says, why don't you have a cell phone? She goes, well, I lost it. I'll have it. I'll have a new one in the next couple days. I goes, well, you're a perfect example. Force fast. I says, how did it make you feel without your cell phone for these few days? She goes, I have clarity.
Oh, wow.
And then my friend, another friend who feeds the homeless in Venice, said the exact same thing. He said he got thrown in jail for a couple days, and I says, how was it without your cell phone? He goes, I loved it. I had clarity. I mean, he used the exact same word.
Clarity.
So, again, it's interesting. I'm not trying to say cell phones are good or bad.
Clarity of what, though? Like what?
Well,
clarity of like. I'm not disagreeing. I'm curious.
Yeah. I'm saying it's probably they're not so attached. Like when McLuhan said that word is the most addicting and universal drug, that's a good example. A friend of mine goes on a retreat where no one can talk for 1 week. That's being without spoken word for 1 week. He says everybody freaks out. We're so addicted to some things, we don't know that we're addicted to them.
Quick story. My mom's done several spiritual retreats in Mexico, and during one of them, and they often have to give up salt and quite a few other things to purify. And I have done similar type experiences, and I found it very therapeutic to give the things up. And then on one of her retreats, people had to give up something that they were personally attached to, more of a soft thing. So one guy was a know-it-all. He was a smart guy. He had the answer. Well, he was not allowed to tell anybody anything. He could answer he didn't. It wasn't that he couldn't talk, but it wasn't like you can't tell. You can't share any of your knowledge. You cannot be the one who knows. Well, the car broke down at one point, and he couldn't share how to fix it. And he said it was incredibly frustrating for him. But it's also that you are getting to walk in the shoes. You're not having to play that role. And so now you just sit back and you watch everybody else fumble. And all of a sudden, now you're not wedged into that role, which you throw yourself into all the time. I thought that was fascinating.
That's really good. It resonates with Bob Dylan learned from the Bible. Don't ever tell anyone everything you know. And every time, like, I remember the moment me and Robbie Dew met in front of Sponto Gallery in Venice. I probably was so enthused because you were such a great listener and we were connecting. I told you everything I knew because, I like, and I'm the exact opposite. When I find someone will listen, I'll tell them everything I know. And it's like, don't overload them,
Good dating advice. Good dating advice as well.
Yeah. That's what you say. Tell me more about that.
Well, the light switch is you let people tell them about you. And just like you said, by me, I'll like you because you let me talk. That's the light switch.
Yeah. Count Victor Lustig, one of the great con men of all time. He has a con man 10 commandments, and one of them on there is don't try to fast talk and just bullshit the guy. Be quiet and listen.
Yes.
And it is this that will get you your coups, because you listen to people. They will reveal everything. You don't ask them, hey, so do you have a safe deposit box in your house? You just.
What's a tarot card reader?
Yeah. Right. Like,
send me a link to that 10 commandments.
Oh, it's in my booklet. I teach it every year.
Oh, good. Okay.
It's a 10 commandments. Now I have them read it, and I do it when I do the lesson on language, and I always end it with this, and I talk about lying, and lying is a function of language that is this unintended outcome, and then through lawyers and legalese, we codified the art of lying because it's real. What is it? It's all interpretation. We got, Your Honor, we have an interpretation of the words that were written down 100 years ago that's a little different than this other guy. And so he says in there, it's very interesting. He says, I won't go through the whole list. It's in the booklet that you have there. But it's fascinating because it's basically listen, don't express a political opinion, don't talk about being sick unless they show a specific interest. Okay. Don't express a religious opinion. And if they express one, you have the same one.
Yeah.
Be quietly confident. Never get drunk. Never look bored. It was all these things. And I asked my students, so what situations of life would this 10 commandments apply to? And of course the answers are first dates, interviews for jobs, meeting the parents, all these sort of things where you're going to show up and put up best behavior are actually in the con man commandments. Right? What does that teach us about language and about, formalized sort of meetings? People understand. It's just sort of understood you're going to take it up a notch. And that's just sort of what this is. It's not, no one ever tells you. It's not like, you're going to meet my daughter. Well, suit and tie, buddy, but it's expected.
what about if you break all those rules? I'm pretty sure the first time I met my in-laws, I was like 3 sheets to the wind, and they're super religious. And I was like, well, they're like, well, what do you believe in? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I believe in anything. Certainly not Christianity. And they were like, crosses everywhere. And my wife is like, Jesus. She's like, whatever you do, don't say Jesus Christ. I'm hammered. I'm like, oh, Jesus, Steve. I mean, I don't know what the hell's going on. And they're all like, and they love me. They love me because I don't switch who I am around anybody. But that's an aside. My point is about what about people who don't follow those rules? Are those the people that we're so interested in? I mean, think about Andy Kaufman, one of the greatest comedians of all time.
Or sociopaths.
Right.
Or serial killers. That is arguably the most egregious violation of the unspoken social code. And they become fascinating. They become, Marilyn Manson then names himself after this person. They become cult heroes in a certain way. Certainly Manson. We make television shows about them. Mindhunter. Yes. I think and here's the thing: fame wipes away all. I mean, those guys are still in prison or dead. So, but I mean, if you're, a weirdo, too weird in anonymity somewhere insignificant, it's probably a rough life. If you last and somehow someone puts you on a podcast and you get some sort of strange notoriety, maybe it brings your quirkiness becomes appreciated. But very few of those people are. I mean,
that was good point, because I think it reverberates with McLuhan saying if it works, it's obsolete. The human being doesn't work, so we're not obsolete. So this is how do we cope with when a human doesn't work? And what do we do with that? We learn from it or whatever. But Robbie Dew, you really have ESP, because I wanted to go into language a little, because this is the form that we're working with as 3 humans is spoken word. And we have the booklet, your booklet, so well put, printed word. And electronic word is the dominant. That's what we're swimming in, this electronic word world. So here's Turing asking 2 questions in 1950. I'd love to start with you, Robbie Dew. Can machines think?
If they're made to.
Good. Okay, Rob Grant. Can machines think?
Yeah. I'll give a good example. There was this advertisement, and the guy had like an Alexa and a Google Home, and he leaves the room, turns the lights off, and then they start talking to each other. And then the guy, I guess he forgets something. He opens the door, and they're like, "Ha ha!" And then he's like, "Whoa, what the hell?" And like, because he caught the mid conversation, kind of like Toy Story. And yes, so I definitely do think that machines are capable of some form of sentience or consciousness.
That's pretty good. That was a really good story too. And Robbie Dew, back to you on the Turing second question, because it's leading to language and thinking.
Right.
What you brought up language, which is so important. The second Turing question is thinking a function of the soul?
As far as I know. Yeah, I mean, yes.
Okay. Rob Grant.
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, then I guess that means that, did we think our souls up? But
right. What came first?
Yeah.
Well, that's good. So now, Robbie Dew, can humans think without language?
I think that my language-driven brain could not conceive of it. That because you think in thoughts, and I mean sometimes you think in images. Yeah, it's maybe voices, which is language still. No, it'd be hard to divorce thinking from language. Yeah.
And we're leading to Chomsky, but let's go with you, Robbie Grant. Rob Grant, can humans think without language?
Well, I mean, just what comes to mind is a deaf person or a deaf mute person. I mean, they're able to think, but I'm thinking of language in terms of spoken word.
Spoken word.
Yeah. And
you know, and you study George Lakoff neuroscience, and they say 80% of what you're thinking and doing is unconscious. So is the unconscious or the subconscious have a language? But here's, you know, Chomsky sort of says, you can correct me, Robbie Dew, if you know more about him, because I haven't studied him enough, but I love all the movies about him. There's so many great movies about Chomsky. That animation one is really good. If you haven't seen it, Rob Grant, you should see it, and you should study Chomsky a little. But he says a language is not just words. It's culture, tradition, unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. So, you know, that's pretty heavy. He's not saying language is just words. So if he says we're hardwired for language, it's sort of like saying we're hardwired for community. So my question, Robbie Dew, is how do you cope when language is not working?
Deep, long stares into someone's eyes.
Oh, that is beautiful. That is an amazing.
You're a better man than me, then.
That is an amazing. Well, let's go into that, Robbie Dew. That is amazing because I think that eye contact, something we've been studying deeply for 2 years now. Human gaze. Did humans, what you just described, Robbie Dew, is that more invented or more innate? Staring into someone's eyes, gaze, the human gaze.
I think it's innate. I think a baby's going to do it immediately. Yeah. In fact, it gets unlearned because in modern society, it's just not, certainly in a city, it's not really considered polite to hold your stare and look at someone that way.
Isn't that amazing?
And I just participated in this eclectic dance thing the other night, and they do an opening circle. They try to get everybody on the same wavelength. It's very hippie, and we all started wandering around the circle, kind of half dancing and inviting people to make eye contact with each other and maybe do a little dance. And some people were willing to make eye contact with me, and some people weren't. And it's sort of a way of, okay, we're all, and then the proper dance started. But yeah, I mean, it can be quite intimidating really looking in somebody's eyes, you know?
Yeah.
Also, from a cultural perspective, because in some indigenous cultures, to look someone in the eyes is like war.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
It's like, we're going to do battle. Whereas in others, it's respect. Like, I was a school teacher, and I would look at kids in the eyes and be like, you know, I'd say good job. I wouldn't be like, what are you doing? Like, I'd be like, good job. And but it would be intense for them because it'd be like, this person is like looking at me.
Right. And even posture, like looking at someone, I mean, squaring up on another man and looking them in the eyes and saying something, you know, hey man, I need you to do this. It's very confrontational, and it's kind of like it's the posture from which a fight would start. You know, you're kind of off to the side and you're sort of like, hey man, it'd be great if you did this. It's a whole different, you know, posture that you know, engage in. It's just sort of natural. You know, you learn it. Where you touch someone, where you know, how close you come to them, all that stuff. And that's cultural as well. Different cultures are very different. Arabic cultures are much closer in their speaking.
And they're smell oriented too. That McLuhan says it in one of his books. He says some cultures go up to each other, and to greet them, they smell each other. That's how they greet them. But there's something around in the neuroscience pop culture world that says if you stare at somebody for 3 to 6 seconds, it's either you want to fuck them or kill them. You know, but that is like an intense thing, because I have this whole article on medium.com about walking down the street in my need to exchange eye contact with anyone I meet. And so many people won't do it. And so right when I get to them, I'll go, morning. And they'll go, morning. You know, they feel obliged if there's a verbal, but they do want to look up and see that there's another human walking around
Right.
at 6 a.m, appreciating the morning. Go ahead, Rob.
Well, the other thing is that as human beings, we can't help but stare. And there is a degree of race. That's not the right word, but for example, if I'm walking around and there's not a lot of black people around here, and I see a black person, I don't even mean to, but I'll look. And if I do that, instead of looking away, I'll look. And if we look, I nod my head. Yeah. And I try to do that with other people, because if you look at someone, you smile and you nod your head.
Yeah,
yeah. And it's not even. Yeah.
Oregon is similarly afflicted with a dramatic lack of melatonin. Yes.
Yeah. Well, myself, right? Yeah. Yes, I lack melatonin. But the other funny thing is, when I was in my early 20s, I looked at, I listened to date doctors and stuff, these pickup artists. And looking back, it was like, these guys are hilarious. He'd be like, if you stare at a woman, or a person, you stare at them until they look away. And that's how you assert your dominance. I'm like, I am not going to do that. Just going around everywhere, like looking at everybody. It's like, I don't think that that's a good way to pick people up. But the psychology that, go ahead.
All those books, those date books, and there were several of those. What was one called? The Rules or something like that. Anyway.
Neil Strauss is the king.
Was that one of them?
Well, he was the author, yeah.
They were, and there's a great example. They were dissecting kind of natural, maybe tribal soul level sort of relations between people in a physical space. And they were sort of gaming them, almost hacking them, saying, well, because of this, then you establish dominance. It's such nonsense. And it really
it's pseudoscience.
It works on a certain type of person, I suppose, a certain type of woman who is also insecure and not within their place. But oh my gosh,
that is a good point, man. It's almost like these. It was very predatorial the way I was hearing it, and I was like, I don't know, man. I think I'm just gonna go with being a goof, like a goofy person. Like that seems to have worked for me.
It's worked out. It's worked out.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I got the trophy wife to prove it, right? I mean, she's just always annoyed by me. It's true. It's like,
but Robbie Dew, that was an amazing answer. Look at that tangent we went on. That was beautiful. Let's just go to you, Rob Grant, for a second. When language doesn't work, how do you cope? Because I mean, to say
so this is what we do. This is what we seem to do nowadays. When there's lulls in conversations, what do people do? Go to a restaurant, look around, and you'll see it real quick. What do people do? They look at their phones. Good Lord, we're all going to have neck problems in 10 years. I mean, I'm just doing this all the time. But it's true. Like today, and this is not a judgment, this is an observation. But there was a guy, and he was vacuuming or whatever. He had the suction thing going. I don't know what he was doing. But it was doing its job, and he was just waiting around. So he's sitting on the curb, and he was looking at his phone. Again, not a judgment. It's just an observation. Yeah. I think is that what we do to pass time now, instead of like be present and like go smell flowers, or I don't know what we used to do before. We're using our phone as the in-between in the things that we're doing. Like Absolutely. I go to the laundromat while I'm waiting, I'm on my phone, right? It takes an awareness of, I'm going to bring a book with me, and I'm going to be that guy reading a book while I'm waiting for something. But it's no different. It's like the guy with the classic car. I'm still doing something to pass time. It's just mine's a little bit more pretentious than the other.
Perhaps.
And Rob, that's making a value judgment.
I know. I do that for humor. Yeah.
No, I know. And that's good, because humor is the key to it all. But when we grew up, we would say, boy, when these kids with cell phones, why don't they talk to each other? They're talking, and they were creating. They created community with cell phones. We think that eye contact and live verbal exchange, direct experience, is better than creating community on a cell phone. That's where we don't know. Causality is a forever gray area. We cannot say. We can make value judgments, but if we're with like 3 people we are here and the millions of viewers, if we refrain from value judgments, what we're trying to do is suss out the big picture, get the comprehensive awareness.
I do think, though, and this is, tell me if this is a value statement, but I do think that it breaks, like, for example, it just breaks the connection if I'm on it wasn't a very good example, but if I'm looking at my phone, it really does take away from it. But again, it's like, I think that's what people are doing more now when there's lulls in conversations, is that because it can be awkward, right?
Yeah, because you can tell in Zooms, having done them for 16 months now, when someone's paying attention, looking at the camera, and when they're actually going on their site and reading something, and now right. I'm starting to try to do that without revealing that I'm doing it. And you can usually tell by their eye movement. But again, Rob Grant, how do you cope when language, you made an example of your observations of other humans, but how do you cope when language doesn't work for you personally?
I think that's definitely a strategy that I've used. I am not saying I'm holier than thou. That's definitely something that I've used. The other thing that I use is I don't know. Sometimes I let things I'm working on that I'll say something, because what I'll do is I'll just say something else. And it's like there's not a pause. But sometimes pause is good in conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm working more on a pause. And sometimes, especially in counseling, because I work as a counselor, that is actually a tactic, is you say something and then you see this person become emotional, right? And then you sit it out. Like there's the knee jerk reaction to save them. Like, oh, it's okay or whatever. But then it's like you let them sit with that and experience it. And they're like, dude, that's healing that is happening there. Or some form of, maybe it's not healing, but it's exploration. And when I first started as a counselor, I would be afraid of those moments. But those moments, if you just shut up, like not you guys, but myself, if I just shut up, this person is going to say something.
So,
and go ahead, Robbie.
The secret to talk therapy is silence.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
It's really well put. It's actually the king of be here now is Richard Alpern, Ram Dass. He wrote a book, Be Here Now, be present and let that space, that gap between. He had a stroke and he couldn't give his 90-minute lectures anymore. He could only talk for 10 minutes and then he had to rest for 5 minutes because of his physical body had been affected. It was like after you listen to him talk for 10 minutes, you should stop and think for 5 minutes in silence. So it really became, an amazing thing of being aware of what McLuhan said. The gap is where the action is. So, this,
where the action is. I like that.
The gap is where the action is. It's the in-betweenness. But, Steven Weinberg just died at 88. He wrote a book called The First 3 Minutes, The Modern View of the Origin of the Universe. Brilliant physicist. Read his obit in the New York Times. Full-page obit. Really, really important. But I would love to get in closing, wrap it up soon, is I'm going to tell you what the line he said. I'm going to ask you to tell me what you think of the line, and then he explains the line. So this is what he was sort of known for, his often quoted line. The more that the universe seems comprehensible, the more it also seems pointless. So Robbie Dew, what do you think of that? I mean, I'm not asking you to agree or disagree, just any thoughts on it. And I can read it again if you want.
I'll refer to I believe it's a quote from Joseph Campbell, where he said the most important questions in life humans can't understand, and they misunderstand the second most important.
Wow.
You know, in other words, yeah, I mean that if life was truly comprehensible, if you ever achieved a point where you really did achieve some form of prescience and understanding, I mean, yeah, you would transcend it. I mean, it's just, you know, you're going to go to your grave with more questions than answers, probably, and that's just part of it. And maybe that, you know, cycling back to our discussion earlier about how do we fix a world of things that we've created. We have to, the things that we create, we can't become attached to them. We have to be aware of that. And also we have to understand that there's constant change, and that we design those things, particularly systems, to have change and adjustments and editing regularly and constantly. And it has to be designed in a way that's fluid and it's built in. The object is built, it's built to have things added on, you know?
That was really well put. Okay.
I agree. Well put.
Rob Grant,
I'm going to actually piggyback on that.
You want me to read the quote again, or you got it?
Yeah, please, if you don't mind.
I'll just read it again so people hear it. The more the universe seems comprehensible, the more it also seems pointless. Yeah.
So you want me to answer what I think?
No, you would just whatever thoughts.
I don't think that the world is comprehensible.
Yeah.
I just think that anybody who thinks that they know does not know. Like, that's you know, I have all the answers. That's a con man. That guy's going to sell you a bridge, right? I mean, it's the truth. Like, the reality is that, like, as far as we go, there will still be mystery. I believe that.
Right.
Like, I think that we will never know everything. It's kind of like God, right? We have anthropomorphized God, saying,
right,
you know, his son came and all this crazy stuff. And it's like, I don't buy that, man. Like, you're saying that God loves you, but he doesn't love gay people? Like, how do you know that? Have you met him? Did you go to like a Trump rally with him? How do you know, right?
First of all,
go ahead, Robbie.
He's a he.
First of all, he's a he. His pronouns are he, him. Does he write that in the Bible? He, him as well? Like what? Yeah.
And he created everything.
Yeah.
And he's really concerned about what? He's really concerned about some stupid word that a language was made up on the planet he created, and now he's upset because, come on.
And he's saying that this one's right, but the other ones that he's also part of are therefore not right. Like, come on, man. I was born yesterday, but I was up all night. Right? Yeah. So to that point, I mean, Robbie brought up a wonderful word that actually ties into psychotherapy and the work that I do, but attachment and attachment theory. And that's that newborn children, they need secure attachments. That if they have secure attachments, they develop in line with where they need to be at that specific stage and age in their lives. The problem is that Buddhism, nothing lasts. Those secure attachments, your parents, one day I'm going to die, right? Because I'm a parent. And it's like, okay, so I'm going to quote a heavy metal album by a band called Hatebreed, which are actually very forward-thinking people. Satisfaction is the death of desire. And satisfaction is the death of desire. And when I heard that, I was like, dude.
Put brutally.
Yeah.
Well, temporarily, because, okay, so you're
going to desire something else.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
yes,
whatever.
Our thirst is insatiable.
Exactly.
Our appetite is insatiable. Our thirst is
you'll never find a better buzz than the first one.
Yeah. Let's do it again.
And you'll do it again and do it again. And especially over time, it will start not to have the same glorious effect.
And you'll be like, I drank 15 beers, but I'm living in a trailer. Like, it's not that much fun anymore. But let's get hammered, right? So I
Now
think that,
now we're talking Trailer Park Boys.
oh, I love that show. Don't get me started. Robbie Dew, we could talk about that.
Yeah.
But the thing here is that you make a very good point that we need to enjoy our attachments while we have them, but we will not have them forever.
And let me
enjoy them while they last.
Sure. That's a good point. Yeah, we're at the beach, go in the damn ocean because that's your chance. So we also have to distinguish between the child mind and the adult mind. I mean, and the Buddhists even address this in their thinking and other more deeper animistic religions. Like, there's levels to consciousness. You don't start talking like deconstructionist philosophy with a child. They just need a ball. And the ball's here every day, just like dad. And these are the basics. And then later on, okay, there's a world out here you can explore. Here are the rules I'm going to give you. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then eventually there's some of the rules, like you can't cross the street. They can break that rule. They can go over and do, and so on and so forth. So, I visited Borobudur, which is a Buddhist temple that was covered in mud for centuries. It was rediscovered, I believe, in '93. It's in Indonesia, and it had 7 levels to it. And each level, initiate had to walk around each level. Okay, Borobudur, Indonesia, and there were gates. You could, and so once you had mastered, then there were relief sculptures all along the wall, both sides, and language written and everything. And you, as an initiate in that, would have to master all that and really understand it. At some point, you would be tested or whatever. You go up to the next level. Same thing. Now, when you're on each level, you couldn't see into the level above, but you would master the readings and the teachings and so on and so forth and so on. When you got to the top, it was these, the Bodhisattva poses, the Buddha, right? So we don't have an initiation process. I mean, our education system is a broken version of that, but we don't have an initiation process. Even things like bar mitzvahs and so forth, those do still exist, but those traditions have faded a lot. They don't mean the same things, and we don't have that same initiating of men into the tribe, so to speak, that and so forth. And sometimes people on the internet who might be at level 1 or 2 of thinking get a hold of some information from up there at level 3 or 4. And they don't have the perspective to put the whole thing in. Even myself, I mean, there's just so many things I feel like I've learned and improved upon that I probably just lessons I couldn't have taken when I was young and full of myself. It's just the stew needs a time to sit on the pot, and different mysteries are revealed to you when your mind is appropriately ready for them. Some people never get past level 1 or 2 or whatever it is, and they're content with it, because I think contained within each layer would sometimes be contradictory information to the layer before, because it turns out when you elevate in consciousness, you now see the game from a different perspective, and you realize that in certain instances, this choice, which we told you always to make, is not the right choice.
Right.
Yeah, that's really well put. And I'm just going to read this couple thoughts that Steve Weinberg had about his own quote, because it was so quoted so often. He says, "Let me explain it. The more the universe seems comprehensible, the more it also seems pointless." He said, "What I meant by that statement is that there is no point to be discovered in nature itself. There is no cosmic plan for us. We are not actors in a drama that has been written with us playing the starring role. There are laws. We are discovering those laws, but they are impersonal. They are cold. It is not an entirely happy view of human life. I think it's a tragic view, but that is not new to physicists. A tragic view of life has been expressed by many poets. So we are here without purpose, trying to identify something that we care about." So it's a lot of gobbledygook, but it is interesting where he goes, because I don't think the laws of nature
But Viktor Frankl, I think Viktor Frankl answered that question.
Go ahead.
man's search for meaning.
Oh.
We have to create meaning. We have
Right.
to find meaning.
Right.
Because if we have no meaning, well, I might as well drink that 15 case and end up in a trailer park and not,
Well, many people do that. That's a valid.
Yeah. You know what? I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I don't mean to put anybody down. I think that's one way to live.
Sure.
That's just
and you know what? The
live.
guys who are on that show, those actors, at least one of them probably has had direct experience with those people. And I know that there's quite a few of those people in Canada, as there was in West Virginia where I grew up. And so he even channeled that experience by then writing the show and making fun of his homies. Probably somebody on that show knows that life.
But also there's a philosophy there, right? Like we can learn something from anybody. Like a friend of mine, one of the smartest people I've ever met, but he never went to school. He's a architectural, he pours concrete. He pours concrete for a living, which is backbreaking work. He said to me, life is life.
Yeah.
And I've never heard a more true statement. Right? So, life is life.
Can I respond to what the first thing?
Yeah.
What was the gentleman who was explaining his quote? What was his?
His name is Steve Weinberg. The first 3 minutes, a modern view of the origin of the universe. Go ahead.
I pretty much agree with his assessment. I think it's pretty right on, and because it's true, that's why religions were invented. I loved your statement earlier that it's what was a religion? It was anthropomorphized.
Yeah.
Because people want answers. Someone came along, and because what that statement that he just read is probably pretty true, and I think a lot of people have it lurking in their mind, maybe in a dark place, that this doesn't mean shit. That this, we're put here. I mean, you're born into a society, and that society begins to take on meaning and all these things. But we as a human race, we really don't know. Those most important questions we can't know, and most of us will go to our grave with no definitive answer. Well, that's terrifying to people.
Yeah.
Here's a religion for you where we're going to explain it to you, and we're going to anthropomorphize the God, so he's like an old wise man, kind of like the guy who's bullshitting you with this story, and he's going to tell you this, and he's got all the answers, and you can do this, and he loves.
You got to pay him. You got to pay him a tithe.
And I mean, First Testament to Second or Old Testament to New Testament, God becomes a hippie. He's like. Throwing lightning bolts.
I want to party. I want to turn water into liquor.
Sliding, and now he's going down and hanging out and taking a woman, and just it's a very different.
He's got a foot fetish. I'm sorry. I couldn't help myself.
Yeah. Well, it is this difference, and I hope we can meet again, Rob, both Robs in the future. This has been truly enlightening for me, and I learned a lot. I am a student, and you're my teachers. Another physicist.
I'm a student too.
Who really was reflecting McLuhan's thing. Let's come up with new questions and new metaphors. Richard Feynman said, "I would rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned."
Oh, thank you. I mean, let me write that down. That's a good one.
I'll send it to you. It is beautiful. And so I wanted to sort of close out in regards to comedy and the Beatles. The Beatles of comedy is Fireside Theater, a great comedy group, and their album is called "Everything You Know Is Wrong." So it really resonates with Rob Grant naming his show. I'm probably wrong about everything, because I don't think you're wrong about everything. I think you're right about the fact that you allow us to hijack your show and have fun reflecting on these things, because back to another Canadian, McLuhan said, communication of the new is a miracle, but it's not impossible. So I've really felt, special here with you two, because I think we have communicated new by banging off of each other ideas, but at the same time listening. Mm-hmm. And maybe it is, if it works, it's obsolete, but it's not going to keep us from trying. So just in closing, Robbie Dew, you got any closing remarks, final benediction?
No, but I did write down a whole diatribe about my course introduction based on our last conversation. This is very good too, as well today. Thank you guys for giving me a platform, making me sound so smart.
Of course.
We love you. And Rob Grant, it's your show, so you want to give a final benediction of any sort?
Well, I love what Robbie was saying about when something becomes a personal item, and please correct me on this, but when something becomes a personal item, that's the last stage of technology or of that technology. So what then is the cell phone, right? I mean, what then is entertainment with a cell phone?
It's an extension of your brain, and it is at the last stage of it's the last stage of typewriters and memos and filing cabinets. It's all those things that we invented during the mid 20th century to extend our minds through paper, primarily storing paper where words were written down. Now it's all the phone is that it's all boom right in your hand.
But it's also, Susie Williams, my wife, just put out her new video. It is a movie production house and theater. She makes an entire movie. You can make movies with cell phones. You can be a publishing house with cell phones.
Yep.
You can, conquer the world as a TikTok star with cell phones. It is an amazing tool that, again, at some point, I mean, basically James Joyce invented the cell phone and disguised it as a book. It's a living organism. So it's extending humanness in a more complete thing than just a pencil or a camera.
You know why I love you, Gerry, is because I can go off on these tangents and you're almost an apologist for me. You're like, oh, Rob, that's kind of a value statement. And I really do appreciate it because but you compliment me nicely because part of my shtick is I just go off on these like
Robbie Dew, hold on 1 second. I got to tell you this. Our last show was Michael Shields and Duncan, and Robbie Dew knows them both well. Michael Shields was Tangent City.
Yeah.
And Duncan, and I said to Duncan, well, Rob Grant thought it was a little tangent-y. And I goes, Duncan goes, no, it was good tangents. No,
it was.
Yeah, it was good tangents, but it was, the beauty of it is that we can go into tangent cities and come back.
Yes.
But Robbie Dew, what were you going to say?
Well, the beauty of Gerry is that he's extremely non-judgmental. And any answer, however outlandish, even the ones that are sometimes done snidely, people will say something sort of to be obvious or to sort of refute the question. Gerry accepts that. And, you went back. That's what we're learning here. And that's what this process is. The process of examining things and looking at our inventions, which are our most precious things in our world, and looking at them objectively. Then, the next final conclusion then is how we look and treat people, and then how we look and deal with the most important issues of our time. Yeah. I'll bring it back full circle to the conversation we had before the podcast, and that was you were saying, why can't the left and right talk to each other? Well, they've retrenched into their tribes.
Yes.
And they're responding to the issues. Even the liberal intellectuals, who I think generally have a better perspective on the issues, they're still guilty in some cases of retreating to emotion, and also just not being willing or able to have empathy with people who are not part of their culture. In other words, people who are still living off the land and living the sticks and don't care about what the New York Times says. And, so you have to look at things objectively and put yourself in other people's shoes. And that more of that needs to be done, but that's not going to happen. So it wasn't an antidote.
Yeah. Well, and Joseph Goebbels, yeah. Well, Joseph Goebbels said something words to the effect of, don't appeal to their intellect, appeal to their emotions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
That's advertising. That's the middle.
Yeah, why? And I think the media was like, hey, that was pretty effective what they did here. And I do think that what Gerry does well, and that, I kind of play around with, but it's the suspension of our emotions and our allegiances. I mean, if we're going to move forward here, we really do have to kind of just step back and say, hey, and it is easier to do that when we don't have skin in the game. You know what I mean? When it's not, our family on the line, when we can kind of abstractly discuss these things. I
will revert to Frank Zappa, because I appreciate your kind words from both of you, and it's inspiring, because I really learned that from Zappa, who taught me to embrace contradiction. And McLuhan said, when you're with one or more people, have suspended judgment when you can. It doesn't mean you can't go home like he did, and people knew he hated TV. He was a literature guy, but he was sort of the pop TV guru on the cover of Newsweek magazine, and in Woody Allen's film. So it is embracing both. You can, but the real challenge is when you meet someone you disagree with, suss out why they say that, and don't attack them and say, well, you should think this way. If you can flip,
because the conversation's over.
So
if the middle of the 20th century is the appropriate quote is appeal to their emotion, then this 21st century, it's appeal to their sensitivities.
Yes.
And their sensibilities. In other words, have your aesthetic, if you want to attract this crowd, have the right ingredients in your products and so forth, and you will attract this crowd because and it's really an outgrowth of the century of self, the Adam Curtis film. We've been since the mid 50s, but now the emotion doesn't work anymore because a lot of people are hip to that, Jerry. That kind of, it works, but it doesn't work nearly as effectively, and people see it coming. And if you're too obvious, they really see it coming. But now appealing to your sensitivities, your political proclivities, that is how you get the customer.
Well put.
Well, guys, thank you so much. Yeah. Last question, pondering question, no answer for it. But as a human species, they say life's about the journey, not the destination. But are we now more a species that fixates and desires the journey, or fixates and desires the destination? And in so doing, is that why time is speeding up? Yeah,
well, my film, The Brother Side of the Wake's all about that, because that's Orson Welles' last film. The Other Side of the Wind was about that. He just wanted to keep making this film with John Huston for like 40 years. They knew they were going to die. They didn't want it made. And then these other guys took it and finished it. And we remade it before it came out, which was the first time. But it's a funny thing when you take a cliche, as Marshall said in his book, you flip it into an archetype. So we know both are important. The flaneurs in France in the 20s are changing the world. Stravinsky, Duchamp, Joyce, all these people, Virginia Woolf, they're changing the world. And they know all we do is sit here and drink coffee and stare at each other and talk and stub our toe, and then we'll have an epiphany in everydayness. But it's endlessly, people go, well, you have to have a goal or a destination. Well, you don't necessarily have to, but we invented the word journey, and we invented the word destination, and we invented the aphorism. So we're forever going to be struggling as it's a duality. So, is it white or is it black? Are we more thinking beings or are we more feeling beings?
We're paradoxical beings, and that's why you're not going to get an answer, and there's never and this dichotomous thinking, it's so flawed, and
the permanent pendulum.
Yeah, and we have that aspect in a lot of aspects of our culture, and a more nuanced, a little from column A, a little from column B is the correct approach. And theoretically, our system's supposed to give us that, but it doesn't. So, it's the breakdown is within ourselves. Most people have a difficult time maintaining balance in their own lives, and they teeter from, well, maybe not everyone, but there's a bit of teetering from one extreme to another. I partied this weekend. I'm going to go to church this Sunday.
It's
I
like
love it.
it's like Rob. I'm going to hit the off button now. Wait, I got one more thing. No, hit the off button now.
I gotta go.
Wait,
All right.
I got to go.
I know. Take care, guys.